Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. Today, I will interpret for you the novel Life and Times of Michael K. The protagonist's name is Michael K., who is a South African. The novel primarily explores K's fate during wartime and how he repeatedly escapes from his own era. This novel is one of the representative works of South African writer John Maxwell Coetzee. Coetzee is one of the most awarded writers in English literature. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2003 and became the first writer to win the Booker Prize twice. His first Booker Prize was awarded for Life and Times of Michael K. Coetzee is a writer who is difficult to label, as his works are diverse in style. To date, he has published over a dozen novels, and no two of them are written in the same manner. However, these works share a common theme: Coetzee's contemplation of human issues, particularly how people can find salvation in adversity. In Life and Times of Michael K., the novel being discussed today, the book delves into the hardships brought by war and how individuals can resist. The title of the novel may sound grand, leading one to believe that the protagonist, Michael K., is a towering hero. However, in reality, he is inherently flawed, hailing from a broken family and living as a person of color in the racially segregated society of South Africa. In other words, he is a struggling individual at the bottom of society, with limited power. In this novel, Coetzee uses Michael K's story to depict the harm inflicted on ordinary people by war, showcasing their helplessness and despair in the face of adversity. But more importantly, he shows us how a vulnerable individual, unwilling to be at the mercy of fate, can resist in their own way. For modern individuals, the question of how to confront the hardships of life and find salvation from them is a subject worthy of constant contemplation. I hope that this novel will inspire you. The interpretation is divided into 3 parts. In the first part, to better understand this novel, let's briefly learn about Coetzee's life and the background of Life and Times of Michael K. In the second part, we will delve into the story and explore the era in which Michael K. exists, as well as his fate and resistance within that era. Coetzee's literary achievements are inseparable from his unique narrative techniques. In the third part, we will discuss 2 narrative characteristics of Coetzee: multiple narrative perspectives and intertextuality. Intertextuality is a term in literary theory, and we will delve into it in detail later on. Part 1. Let's start by briefly understanding Coetzee's life. When it comes to Coetzee's life, a few words often come up: elusive and complex. Indeed, his experiences were quite diverse. Coetzee's life was not confined to one place. Instead, he wandered and traveled through multiple countries. Coetzee was born in Cape Town, South Africa in 1940. From a young age, he experienced the collision of different cultures. He was of Dutch immigrant descent, with a father who worked as a lawyer and a mother who was a primary school teacher. Coetzee was proficient in South African Dutch but grew up speaking English at home and receiving an English education. As he grew up, South Africa's policy of racial segregation gradually took shape and became prevalent. At the age of 22, in order to avoid military service, Coetzee left South Africa and went to London. He worked in the computer software design industry for several years and also obtained an English master's degree through distance learning. At 25, Coetzee went to the United States to pursue a PhD in literature. However, his application for permanent residency in the United States was rejected, so he returned to South Africa and taught in the English department at the University of Cape Town until his retirement. During this time, he also taught at American universities on multiple occasions. In 2002, Coetzee once again left South Africa and moved to Australia. The unique survival environment of South Africa and his subsequent life experiences in exile deepened his understanding of the problems faced by modern existence. Coetzee has always had a passion for literature. Although he started his career as a novelist relatively late and began writing only after returning to South Africa, he has been highly productive. He produces a new work almost every few years, and his most significant works were mostly created during his time in South Africa. In 1974, he published his first novel, Dusklands. In 1983, his fourth novel, Life and Times of Michael K., was published, earning him the Booker Prize that year. In 1999, his novel Disgrace won him the Booker Prize for the second time. As the first author to win the Booker Prize twice, he has never attended the announcement events, which reflects Coetzee's low-key nature. He once said, "In my life, I have successfully managed to avoid becoming a celebrity." Coetzee's works are consistently enigmatic, and his low-key nature adds to the challenge of understanding him. Perhaps the best way to comprehend him is to delve into his works. If we were to pick a character typical of Coetzee from all of his works, it would be the protagonist of today's novel, Michael K. In the Nobel Prize Committee citation for Coetzee, they mention that the typical protagonist in Coetzee's works, after suffering setbacks, sinking into despair, and even being stripped of their external dignity, always manages to miraculously regain the strength to stand up again. Later, we will see that although Michael K. is a weak individual in South African society, facing various hardships, he will pursue freedom at any cost. Coetzee began writing Life and Times of Michael K. around May 1980. The novel is not lengthy, consisting of only several 100,000 words, but Coetzee wrote 6 or 7 drafts before finally completing it in 1983. In this novel, Coetzee intentionally simplifies the timeline and social background, with the clear setting being Cape Town, South Africa at the beginning of the story. Afterward, regardless of where Michael K. goes, all related descriptions blur the boundaries between reality and fiction, with minimal time markers. The novel does not directly depict war, but the shadow of war is ubiquitous. The book frequently mentions martial law, the military, and travel permits that restrict people's freedom of movement. The entire society is filled with anxiety and a sense of terror. Scholars studying Coetzee have found that these situations resemble the social context of 1970s and 1980s South Africa. During that period, South Africa was in turmoil, with the white government oppressing people of color. The latter harbored resentment towards white people and often engaged in protests and social unrest. Consequently, they identified the backdrop of Life and Times of Michael K. with that particular period. Part 2. After learning about Coetzee's life and the background of his work, let's delve into the story. The book is divided into 3 parts. The story of the first part begins in Cape Town, South Africa. Right from the beginning, the novel describes how Michael K. was born with a cleft lip, a lip that curled like a snail's foot, with a fissure on the left side of the nostrils. He had a disfigured face and a slow mind, and no conventional institution was willing to accept him. Therefore, during his youth, he had to board at a special school supported by government relief. The school's name was Huisnorlenis, where children were taught basic reading, writing, arithmetic, as well as practical skills like sweeping, digging, and woodworking. After graduating from there, the 15-year-old Michael K. became a gardener in the parks department. He never had a girlfriend and enjoyed his solitude. However, he would visit his mother once every week. Michael K.'s birth and upbringing seemed to be solely connected to his mother. The book never mentioned where his father went. When reminiscing about his childhood, Michael K. mentioned his imagination of the word father once. He said, "My father is Huisnorlenis." Father is the regulations posted on the dormitory door. The first one of the 21 regulations states, "Maintain silence in the dormitory at all times." Father is the woodworking teacher who twists my ear with the hand that lacks a finger if I don't cut the thread straight. Father is also those Sunday mornings, dressed in khaki shirts, khaki shorts, and black shoes, we march together to the church on Papagaai Street, seeking God's forgiveness. These are all my fathers. This passage tells us that Michael K. lacked paternal love during his upbringing, and his mother was his sole companion. He even felt that he came into this world to take care of his mother. The mother had been working as a housemaid, but when Michael K. turned 31, she fell ill. Her condition worsened, and due to the volatile situation, the hospital became increasingly chaotic, with nurses ignoring her. The mother knew that during times of war, the world would treat her with indifference. She told her son that her only wish was to leave the city, which offered her little hope, and return to the quiet and peaceful countryside where she had spent her youth. She also planned for Michael K. to quit his gardening job and accompany her to the countryside, finding work on a farm. Michael K. believed his mother's plan was wise, and a picture appeared in his mind: vast grasslands, a snow-white farmhouse with spirals of smoke rising from the chimney, his mother standing at the door, smiling, healthy, waiting to welcome him home as the long day drew to a close. The mother and son prepared to bid farewell to Cape Town and embark on their journey. However, as the situation grew increasingly tense, public transportation came to a near standstill. Holding the money his mother had painstakingly saved, Michael K. headed straight to the train station. The ticket seller informed him that he was willing to sell him 2 tickets. However, if he wanted to board the train, he not only needed to reserve seats in advance but also obtain a permit allowing departure. The earliest reservation the ticket seller could offer was for 2 months later, and as for the permit, Michael K. had to obtain it from the police. But when he approached the police for the permit, they simply asked him to wait. As he waited, the permit never arrived, and the situation in the city grew more chaotic with a series of violent incidents occurring while his mother remained ill. Finally, Michael K. could wait no longer. He used tools to fashion an old crate and a wheelbarrow into a makeshift cart that could carry a person. He pushed his mother and their belongings, facing countless hardships as they bypassed 2 checkpoints and embarked on their journey back to their homeland. Michael K. initially thought that it would only take a few days on the road to reach their destination, and passers-by might even give them a lift. However, they encountered severe weather and encountered 2 robbers. During their arduous journey, the mother's body couldn't withstand it, and she died on the road. After his mother's death, Michael K. lost his sense of purpose. He wandered aimlessly in a city, with no cart to push and the luggage becoming meaningless to him, so he discarded them, keeping only a black coat and his mother's ashes. He no longer obeyed curfew, dressed in ragged clothes, and roamed around like a vagabond. Because he lacked identification documents, he was forced onto a train and assigned to work with prisoners by the guards. After finishing their work, the guards abandoned Michael K. in the wilderness. He continued forward, clutching his mother's ashes, and once again embarked on the journey back to his homeland. A few days later, Michael K. finally reached the countryside where his mother had lived, but the farm had been abandoned for many years due to the war and had become a desolate area. He had to rely on nature to survive, searching for water sources and cultivating the land on his own. Upon hearing this, we realize that this novel is filled with hardships and suffering. Does Michael K. have moments of happiness? Yes, his fleeting moments of happiness are always associated with his cultivation, with discovering water sources and growing pumpkins. As the novel describes, it is only during those moments that he feels his life follows the rhythm of sunrise and sunset, as if living in a pocket outside of time. Whether it's Cape Town or the war, or how he gradually arrived at this farm, it all becomes increasingly distant and fades into oblivion. Unfortunately, Michael K.'s moments of happiness never last long. The external world always reaches out to him, either with invading hands or with hands claiming to save him. First, the grandson of the abandoned farm's owner, who had become a deserter, returned to the farm and encountered Michael K. This person wanted to hire Michael K. to work for him, helping him survive in this desolate place. In his eyes, if there were to be a slave in this no-man's land, Michael K. was the most suitable candidate. However, Michael K., who longed for freedom, would never willingly work for him. He abandoned the pumpkins sprouting in the field, seized the opportunity when the man went to town to buy things, and left without a word, once again embarking on his journey of escape. But he didn't enjoy his freedom for long before being captured by soldiers from the town. As he lacked identification documents, Michael K. was charged with violating curfew. Like other homeless people, he was sent to a refugee camp where forced labor was mandatory. There, Michael K. had no personal freedom and had to work day and night. The subsequent events in the novel are a series of Michael K.'s continuous escapes, being incorporated into a group, and breaking free again. At one point, he returned to the farm that had once brought him immense solace, only to find that the pumpkins he had planted had withered. He hid in an underground hole and, with his nimble hands, created a small private plot where he sowed pumpkin seeds. Just as these pumpkins were beginning to grow, the cycle of fate started again. The Free Corps, a guerrilla group hiding in the mountains, invaded Michael K's territory, ate his pumpkins, and left. As they fought against racial segregation, the Free Corps departed, and government troops arrived shortly after. They believed that Michael K was affiliated with the Free Corps and had provided them with food, so they captured him, and once again, Michael K lost his freedom. Although Michael K is constantly captured, whether in labor camps, charitable organizations, the Free Corps, or government troops, none of them can successfully keep him in any form. His portrayal in the novel may seem weak and humble, but it conceals an incredibly stubborn and resilient core, the intense longing for freedom. The only state that makes him comfortable is expressed in the novel as follows: "Now I must have arrived in a place rarely visited by people. Surely no one would be crazy enough to cross these plains, climb these mountains, and search through each stone to find me. Now the whole world must know only I know where I am, and I can conclude that I have disappeared." The events mentioned earlier occurred in the first part of the novel. In the second part, we witness Michael K's subsequent story through the account of a military doctor. Due to his extremely weakened condition, he was admitted to a hospital for rehabilitation. However, he refused to speak and barely ate, teetering on the brink of starvation. Did he not want to live anymore? The military doctor gradually realized that this man did not want to die. He just didn't like the food here. He thoroughly disliked it. He wouldn't even eat baby food. Perhaps he only eats the bread of freedom. The military doctor attempted to save him, but he showed no gratitude whatsoever. Just when everyone believed that Michael K was at death's door and prepared to collect his body, he miraculously escaped once again, pursuing his freedom. In the third part of the novel, Coetzee presents a somewhat surreal romantic ending. After his escape, Michael K, after a long trek, seems to have returned to Cape Town. In a state of daze, he recalls the brief moments of happiness he once had on the farm and begins planning how to return there. We cannot determine whether this ending truly occurred or if it was a hallucination in Michael K's final moments. What we do know is that until the very last moment of the novel, Michael K's spirit remains free, unoppressed by any force. Part 3. Having grasped the main plot of the novel, let's now discuss two narrative characteristics of Coetzee's writing through this novel. First, let's examine the narrative perspective. Narrative perspective refers to the narrator of the story, the viewpoint from which the story is observed and told. It typically includes first-person, second-person, and third-person perspectives. In this novel, Coetzee employs multiple narrative perspectives. He uses a third-person perspective in the first and third parts of the novel, allowing an observer to narrate Michael K's experiences. This observer is sometimes omniscient, such as at the beginning of the novel where we learn that Michael K was born with a cleft lip, has a dull mind, and leads a solitary life with his mother. We also gain insight into the social environment he resides in, which is becoming chaotic with a succession of violent incidents, causing people's lives to be tumultuous. After Michael K's mother's death, the observer no longer possesses complete knowledge but instead focuses the perspective on Michael K himself. We follow him through his journey, experiencing the oppression faced by the underprivileged in South African society, and through his life of cultivation, understanding his moments of happiness and his yearning for freedom. In the second part of the novel, the narrative perspective suddenly shifts to that of the military doctor, adopting a first-person perspective. The doctor becomes a participant in the story rather than an observer. The first-person perspective easily immerses readers in the story, allowing us not only to see Michael K as the vulnerable and pitiful figure through the eyes of the doctor but also to develop admiration for this weak individual's steadfast pursuit of freedom. Witnessing Michael K's successful escape, we, like the military doctor, also feel a sense of disbelief. Initially, the military doctor viewed K as a pitiful and helpless individual, a small old man, malnourished for a long time, weighing less than 40 kilograms, imprisoned in the camp and even forced to participate in physical training. After collapsing and being admitted to the ward with weak breathing and a faint heartbeat, Michael K refused to eat. This aroused the curiosity and pity of the military doctor, who gradually became entangled in Michael K's life. His attitude towards Michael K slowly shifted from curiosity to involuntary concern, envy, and even obsession. The military doctor had no idea about Michael K's inner thoughts, and never anticipated that this seemingly weak person in everyone's eyes could escape the camp alone and continue the search for freedom. If this part were still narrated from a third-person perspective, Michael K's character might not have been as emotionally stirring, and his resistance to adversity and pursuit of freedom would not have been as prominent. The first-person perspective of the military doctor also reveals that his efforts to help Michael K are, in fact, a means to maintain his own mental balance. In the eyes of the military doctor, he, like his patient, is confined within walls, yet his consciousness yearns for spiritual freedom. He even imagines himself following in Michael K's footsteps, running together outside the walls. There is a passage in the novel that conveys this meaning. The military doctor regards the Michael K outside the walls as his interlocutor and says, "Your garden, let me tell you, what kind of meaning does that sacred and alluring garden have, flourishing at the heart of the desert, creating sustenance for life? The garden you are heading towards is both elusive and omnipresent. It is an alias for the place where you belong, Michael, where you will never feel homeless. It is not marked on any map, and no straightforward route can lead to it. Only you know how to get there. The place where you belong here signifies the freedom both the military doctor and Michael K yearn for." The first-person perspective of the military doctor also indirectly tells us that Michael K's continuous acts of escape force those around him to reconsider their own sense of survival. Having discussed narrative perspective, let's now explore Coetzee's second narrative characteristic, intertextuality. Simply put, it refers to the interaction between texts. We often encounter shadows of classic texts in a new article, where the new article not only quotes these shadows but also changes our perception of them through adaptation. Coetzee's novels almost always embody intertextuality, and in this novel, after the death of Michael K's mother, we gradually discover some familiar literary prototypes within the protagonist's character, forming an intertextual relationship. Let's start with the first literary prototype. Michael K's surname is peculiar, and there is another famous fictional character with the same surname, Joseph K. from Franz Kafka's novels The Castle and The Trial. Clearly, Coetzee intends to pay homage to Kafka through Michael K. Both protagonists share the surname K and undergo similar experiences. Kafka's Joseph K. is forever circling outside the castle, and Michael K.'s recurring attempts to obtain a permit from the police, which never gets approved, bears resemblance to Joseph K. In Life and Times of Michael K., the word castle even appears several times, serving as a reminder that Coetzee's K, just like Kafka's K, struggles on the fringes and crevices of a powerful system. Joseph K. in Kafka's writings never physically enters the castle. Compared to this prototype character, Michael K. seems to possess much stronger physical capabilities. He can build a handcart that can carry a person with his bare hands and undertake long journeys with his mother in bad weather. When he finally reaches the farm and must rely on nature to survive, he resembles Robinson Crusoe, who is stranded on a deserted island. Robinson Crusoe is a novel written by British author Daniel Defoe, primarily depicting the story of the protagonist Robinson Crusoe drifting to an uninhabited island and how he survives on the island before eventually returning to society. This intertextual relationship in the plot is not a coincidence. Coetzee was fascinated by Robinson Crusoe from a young age and believed that everything described in the novel was true. His interest in Robinson Crusoe endured, and after the publication of Life and Times of Michael K., he promptly wrote a novel titled Foe, which includes the original author Defoe, the novel's character Robinson Crusoe, Friday, and an added female character. The portrayal of Robinson Crusoe in Coetzee's work differs from its literary prototype. Defoe's Robinson Crusoe possesses the traits of a proactive, optimistic, and confident colonizer of the wilderness, while Coetzee's Robinson Crusoe occasionally exhibits negative and absurd emotions. The protagonist Michael K. in today's novel bears a resemblance to the opposite side of Robinson Crusoe in Defoe's writing. In many passages, we can see a reverse Robinson Crusoe. Taking hunting as an example, in Robinson Crusoe, Robinson eagerly hunts and domesticates wild goats, making them his primary source of food. The entire process follows a rational and scientific approach, step by step. Michael K. also has a significant encounter with goats, which is a pivotal scene in the novel. However, his pursuit, dissection, barbecue, and consumption of the goat do not lead to triumphant progress. In his eyes, the process of turning a goat into food is arduous and dirty, filled with bloodshed. He not only derives no pleasure from eating it but also quickly develops a high fever. After recovering, Michael K. never touches another goat and distances himself further from meat. His appetite seems permanently tainted by that act of slaughter. In the later parts of the novel, we witness how anorexia gradually takes over Michael K.'s body. Michael K.'s negative attitude towards social life and his refusal to be pitied, relieved, or liberated throughout his escape process make the entire novel resemble a tale of seclusion. This attitude brought controversy and trouble to Coetzee. When Coetzee wrote Life and Times of Michael K., South Africa was at the peak of resistance against colonialism and racial segregation, with the entire country engulfed in a war between oppressors and liberators. Other South African writers would have their characters join the liberation forces, but Coetzee had Michael K. refuse to join the freedom fighters and choose to tend to vegetables instead. It was because he focused not on oppression itself but on the issue of humanity, the dilemma oppression creates for the human spirit, and the harm it inflicts on human nature. The different focus points made Coetzee's work appear to be detached from the reality of South African politics. In that social context, this approach seemed somewhat unconventional, and he faced criticism as a result. Faced with controversy, Coetzee remained silent as always. He was like his character Michael K., who, when able to replace speech with silent actions, would always choose the latter. However, in the eyes of Coetzee's supporters, it was precisely this negative resistance of the protagonist, who refused any contact with the social and political environment, that constituted the greatest charm of Coetzee's work, giving his works a shimmering cold beauty. From a societal perspective, Michael K. is a pitiable and helpless weakling. He lacks the ability to directly resist his fate. However, from a spiritual perspective, he is a strong individual. Avoidance is his way of resistance, and even in a critical state, he chooses to climb over high walls, willing to pay the price of his life for freedom. What Life and Times of Michael K. fervently depicts is, in fact, the pursuit and defense of freedom by individuals. Michael K., physically weak, always manages miraculous escapes in dire circumstances. The power to save himself comes precisely from his belief in freedom. Alright, that's the essence of Life and Times of Michael K. interpreted for you. Let's recap today's content. 1. Coetzee is a South African writer with a rich life experience, having resided in multiple countries for extended periods. He maintains a low profile and actively avoids fame, yet he is also one of the most awarded writers in English literature, having received the highest literary honor, the Nobel Prize in Literature. His novels share a common theme: how individuals find salvation in adversity. 2. Today's Life and Times of Michael K. is one of Coetzee's representative works. He critiques the harm caused by war, unveils the oppression of violence on individuals, and shows us the resilience of the weak. Michael K.'s way of resisting oppression is through constant escape, in pursuit of freedom. The backdrop of the novel is the turbulent period in South Africa, but Coetzee's focus is not solely on the brutality of violence and oppression, but on the dilemmas and harm they inflict on humanity. 3. Multiple narrative perspectives and intertextuality are two narrative characteristics of Coetzee. Through the third-person point of view, he outlines the social background in which Michael K. exists, his family, and his past. Additionally, through the first-person perspective, he makes Michael K.'s character more emotionally resonant. Within the portrayal of Michael K., we can recognize familiar literary prototypes. Like Kafka's characters, Michael K. struggles on the fringes and in the gaps of a formidable system. However, he lacks the optimism and positivity of Robinson Crusoe. Instead, he adopts passive resistance, refusing any contact with the social and political environment. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.